out of Lutheran experience, and you know, Lutherans have got a lot to offer, and some of my best friends are Lutherans, but there's that. It really doesn't matter so much anymore, the denominational specificity. It really matters more the congregation's spiritual nurture, and that's a lot of the shift that has occurred. Now, I've spent all morning on that part, but let me move to another part, unless somebody wants to say something else about that. Yes.
I should have something more.
Yes.
I was just sitting here listening to the people who are talking, and each person is saying someone else is the one that mentioned it to them, or who brought them, or whatever, which puts a big responsibility on us as Christians to say or to show what it is we believe.
Well, you finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That is just, I mean, that's an absolutely gorgeous insight.
Lewis gave a sermon last week on the courage to speak.
Well, yeah. I was thinking of this fire that just came, and something about, you know, talking to at least one other, and you know, in our professional lives and whatever.
Those of you, I'm trying not to repeat myself on Friday night, but I can't help in this case because most Presbyterians have not invited anybody to come with them to church, even though most Presbyterians in a church like this are having fun and finding religious fulfillment, spiritual Christian fulfillment, and yet we're attending to our manners so much, and it's not because we don't care about what's happening here. It's because we don't want to offend anybody to ask them to come with us. And there are parts of the Christian family that are much more assertive, and some would say even aggressive, in or arrogant. And I got to say, you know, we as a denomination are no longer really arrogant so much as we're despairing of our loss of status, and it's a very interesting. I don't know about second. Is second still arrogant about it? I may have jumped too fast, but yes.
One thing, and second, we've embraced the Great Banquet program, which brings in a lot of folks from all over, ladies and men,
right,
other denominations, and then we have the opportunity then to minister and banquet, and then sometimes they
That's cool. That's it, and is
being open, and I think that drops the arrogance part.
Well, and as they join, they'll help you too. Right. I mean, that's a really, and there are so many different ways that y'all are. I'm sorry. I said it again, didn't I? But there's so many different ways that you're engaged in ministry and the hospitality that you're focusing in the spot in the whole church's orientation. I just think that's a wonderful way to think about what it is to invite people to come and then to have them come. I got to say, the first time I came here was probably 30 years ago. I was teaching Sunday school, but the Sunday school teacher didn't invite me to go to church, so I went to church on my own. And I think the person spoke to me as they gave me a bulletin, and that was my experience of being welcomed into worship. Now I know that's shifted now, and I see the evidence of it as you are helping each other have the energy to speak and have it be a warm experience for people that are coming, and then think about what they're going to be thinking about after they leave. And all, I mean, I know all that's going on now. It's very important. But it's different, isn't it? It is very different. And you learn those things about how to be a hospitable congregation across an ecumenical situation. You're learning from hospitable churches in every part of the Christian family. And so the shift from a parochial institution to an ecumenical institution is one of the major shifts that has gone on. Yes?
I'm sorry, but I'm curious because
Don't be sorry.
I'm in a class at the seminary that's studying the polity of our church and
Studying what?
the polity of the Presbyterian church.
Yeah, studying Presbyterian polity.
Yeah, and you know, at every level of the councils in our Constitution and form of government, ecumenism reappears and is stressed. But as you talk about the faith, I mean, that was always there.
That's correct.
I'm wondering if you believe that it's because we have to now, that we're looking more outward when we didn't so much.
I'm going to just speak very personally here. I think at the national level, the polity is written. But I think that the effective practice comes from congregational level, and that it really doesn't matter too much what the national church says you're supposed to be doing. It really matters what you consider worth doing. And this looks at first like it's something that's entirely new. Actually, the 19th century and the Presbyterian flourishing in 19th century America was more based on what I just said than it was on national. The Book of Order and the Book of Discipline. There wasn't a Book of Discipline at the turn of the 20th century in 1900. And the Book of Order was about that thick. And it grew and grew and grew. But see, even the national church is learning, of the national representatives are learning, because they just got rid of an awful lot of those rules and regulations. And so the national church is turning around too. But if it turns around, it's got to turn around because congregations make it turn around. The representatives from congregations have to be active agents to get the national church to change. It's very difficult for us. They had a meeting just a few weeks ago of the stated clerks of the presbyteries in the Presbyterian Church. And one of the assistant moderator gave a little speech about the limits of the Book of Order to the stated clerks. And that was not received very well. Because the presbytery stated clerks are the keepers of the old order. And so it's going to be very difficult for them to shift, so they're going to have to be shifted. But that's they are being shifted, and there are many presbyteries now where the stated clerk is quite different. And at the national office, in the Office of General Assembly, one of the head folk there told me recently that no longer do they, when they get a question, no longer do they immediately cite the Book of Order answer so much as they then coach the folks who ask the question about what the problem is that they're asking the question about. So how can they solve the problem rather than citing the law? Does that make sense?
It does.
Sounds pretty good to me too.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
With that, would you categorize the, I guess, embryogenesis of the next conference as being congregationally driven among the representative ministerial staff as an effort to try to ease the tumult?
Yeah, y'all hosted a next conference, so you're really way along in this process. That was a wonderful thing, and another of the items in the new ecology that I talk about is the fact that it's bubbling up rather than top down. And it's bubbling up in things like the next conference. And they're having regional next conferences now, and they just had one in DC, and it was just a really good experience for pastors and elders, about use the new terminology, teaching elders and ruling elders, both to experience a time when
It's not new terminology.
it's kind of
That's
weird.
how I was ordained 30 years ago.
It's kind of weird, but the old ones of us were there before. And it's just very interesting to see that shift. And yes, the next conference is a perfect example of the bubbling up. And Lewis and a group of pastors, mostly young ones, by the way, I think Lewis was an old guy in the grad.
There were a few other old guys.
There were a few other old guys.
There was a lot of youngers.
But I got to say, if you were here for that, what you saw was the featuring of the next generation of leaders rather than the featuring of the generation of people who are leaders right now. And what a marvelous thing. That's like Synod meetings were in the 19th century. When the Synod would meet, pastors and elders would gather, and the preaching was about half and half between the stalwarts that had leadership for a number of decades and those who were coming fresh out. And so then they were teaching each other by doing, and that was a typical Synod meeting in the 19th century. Of course, it was hard to get to them and hard to get away from them, so there were 3 days or 5 days of that, which we would look at now and say what that was a continuing education class in preaching and pastoral care. And see, that's like the next conference. I just want to make sure that I have a minute to talk about geography and race and gender, because geography is really important. In the old days, we were circumscribed geographically by days travel on horseback. Presbyteries were still set that way in the beginning of the 20th century. And there's still that kind of thinking about connectionalism, that we're connectional through presbyteries, when in fact, second is connectional through Whitewater Valley, but you're also connectional through churches like your church, mostly Presbyterian, but not necessarily Presbyterian, throughout the country, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps throughout the world. And when you want to know what's going on in the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, it's accessible to you to see what's going on. And most of the time, even when it's in another language, it can be translated to English very easily if you're not speaking the other language. And all of that is a tremendous shift in terms of where we get our ideas, and where we understand Jesus to be, and where we see the Holy Spirit at work. And we're making accommodation to it, but we're making accommodation to it kind of on the back of the wave, so to speak. The wave is in front of us, and one of the things to get conscious of is that that shift is that thorough. And if you'll also let me say, it's faster and faster. The shift is occurring faster and faster. The speed with which change is occurring is multiplying. So we've hit most of the ingredients in the new ecology. Just mention a couple more. One is the shift that's occurred because of gender, so that now women and men are equally sharing almost all the responsibilities. Carol, we're still a little behind in seminaries, most seminaries, in terms of equal sharing among men and women. We're still behind in, can I say high steeple preachers? Is that, you understand what that phrase means? We're still behind the curve, but that's shifting radically right now. And pardon? Somebody going to say something? Okay, it's shifted radically right now. In a congregation like this, I looked at your elders and deacons, and you're 50-50. Now, somebody at some point is paying attention to that, and to make sure that the distribution is occurring fairly by gender. At Williamsburg Church, we have 5 African-American families in a congregation of 1,300. All 5, either the husband or wife has been on a governing board or is on a governing board. I would imagine that you're straining also to include Asians and African Americans and others within your leadership. And you got to know that that's a very significant difference. And I guess it's not quite as pointed in a Indianapolis situation as it is in a Memphis or Williamsburg, but my guess is it's not all that different in practice. Yes.
With that effort being made, is it helping or hindering the growth of the Presbyterian Church in the country?
What do you mean by growth?
Number, size, new
Yeah.
congregation?
If the literature is right on the part of the people that write about church growth, it's probably hindering. If you're talking to a guy like me about what growth is, I think it is absolutely imperative that we do it. And I think that that one of our things that we don't do very well is explain to people what we're doing and why we're doing it. That God loves everybody, and that women are smarter than men, and that finally we're, I'm teasing, but that may be true.